Donald Trump just made a phone call to a television network in the midst of a war. This wasn't to announce a ceasefire or to declare a significant breakthrough. Rather, it was to soothe the nerves of anxious stock traders. With a single phone call and a vague assertion that the Iran war is essentially over, the S&P 500 quickly erased its losses for the day. Oil prices, which had been soaring toward $115 a barrel, suddenly plummeted by 30%. Two conflicting realities are operating simultaneously. On one hand, the Secretary of Defense is telling 60 Minutes that this war is merely the beginning. On the other, the President of the United States is telling CBS that it's pretty much finished. One government, two completely contradictory messages. And lurking behind both statements is a phone call with Vladimir Putin that should make every observer deeply uneasy. In the next few minutes, I will break down exactly what transpired, how the administration's own statements reveal contradictions they cannot conceal, and why the geopolitical landscape shifted today in ways most people have yet to comprehend. Imagine hiring a contractor to renovate your house. He tells you the project will take 5 weeks. 6 days in, he calls to say, pretty much done. But when you check with his foreman, he insists, we have only just begun. Meanwhile, the contractor has been on the phone with your neighbor, the one who has been undercutting your business for years. And that neighbor is now publicly announcing plans to help the contractor find a solution. How confident would you feel about that renovation? Keep that thought in mind, as it perfectly illustrates today's events. Share your thoughts in the comments. How many contradictions does it take before you stop calling it strategy and start labeling it chaos? Let's rewind to understand how we reached this extraordinary moment. When the United States initiated its military campaign against Iran, the objectives were ambitious: eliminate the regime, destroy Iran's nuclear enrichment capabilities, neutralize its ballistic missile threat, and dismantle its ability to project power through proxy forces. The timeline, as outlined by administration officials, was estimated at 4 to 5 weeks. The language was assertive, clear, and unequivocal. This operation was meant to showcase overwhelming American power and reshape the Middle East. However, 6 days in, reality began to unfold its own narrative. Iran's navy suffered significant damage, communications infrastructure was compromised, and the Air Force was hit hard. Yet Iran did not collapse. The regime did not fold. Instead, leadership shifted not to a moderate reformer or a Western-aligned figure, but to Matoa Ham, the son of the former supreme leader, a man considered even more extreme than his father. Ironically, the very outcome the war aimed to prevent, the entrenchment of hardline theocratic power, occurred within the first week. Receipt number 1, the CBS phone call. About an hour before markets closed on a tumultuous trading day, Donald Trump called CBS and spoke with a reporter. His message was meticulously crafted, not for military audiences or diplomatic channels, but for Wall Street. He proclaimed that the Iran war is pretty much complete. He stated that Iran has no navy, no communications, and no air force, asserting that the United States is well ahead of its initial timeline. Predictably, the markets reacted positively. The S&P erased its losses, and oil prices sharply declined from their highs near $115 a barrel. As one analyst succinctly put it, we all understand that Trump called to deliver a vague but optimistic comment in the afternoon to boost the markets and offset the day's drop. The war was not over. The objectives had not been achieved, but the stock tickers needed a narrative, and Trump provided one. That is not strategy. That is market manipulation disguised as leadership. Receipt number 2, the Putin phone call. Prior to declaring a quasi-victory on CBS, Trump spoke with Vladimir Putin. What followed should alarm anyone paying attention. According to the Kremlin's readout, an account the Trump administration did not dispute, Putin shared his proposal for how to end the war swiftly. Putin was quick to announce publicly that Trump called him and that they would collaborate to devise a solution. This raises serious concerns. The President of the United States, in the middle of a war, reached out to the leader of a country that stands as the single greatest beneficiary of that conflict. The surge in oil prices has created a financial boon for Russia, particularly after the Trump administration eased critical sanctions, allowing Russia to sell oil freely. Following this phone call, reports surfaced that the administration is contemplating removing even more sanctions, enabling Russia to sell even more oil to additional markets. Russia has not fired a single shot in this conflict. It is winning by simply observing, and Washington has invited Moscow to help script the resolution. Receipt number 3, the Heggs contradiction. On Friday, Defense Secretary Pete Heggs appeared on 60 Minutes and delivered a starkly different message from the one Trump conveyed days later. Heggs stated, "What I want your viewers to understand is this is only just the beginning." He outlined 6 days of operations, discussed sinking more boats, hitting additional targets, and emphasized the need for more time to secure critical waterways. He called it early. Yet just days later, the president told CBS, "The war is pretty much complete." It goes even further. The Department of Defense, which now officially refers to itself as the Department of War, released a statement after Trump's CBS interview that read, "We have only just begun to fight." The president claims it's done, while the defense secretary insists it has just begun, and the Pentagon asserts they are only getting started. This is not merely a communications gap. It is an administration at war with its own war. If this analysis is connecting dots you haven't seen assembled in one place, you are already ahead of most people following this situation. Subscribe right now. This situation is evolving faster than any single outlet can track, and you need to be here for the next development. Here's why this situation is so structurally dangerous. There is no strategist in this equation. There is no figure quietly building networks, forging alliances, or positioning for the long game. Instead, we have blunt force operating without coherent objectives, publicly contradicting itself within 72 hours, and seeking assistance from adversaries. Consider what Iran's perspective looks like right now. Kamal Karazi, the foreign policy advisor to the Supreme Leader's office, appeared on international television and delivered a message that was the exact opposite of capitulation. He stated that Iran's military is quite strong, that Iran produces its own weapons and is not reliant on any other nation. He characterized this as an existential threat to the Islamic Republic and asserted that Iran would respond with full force. When asked directly whether Iran is seeking a ceasefire, his response was unequivocal. "I do not see any room for diplomacy anymore because Donald Trump has been deceiving others and not keeping his promises." Meanwhile, Trump referred to the entire war as a short-term excursion during a Republican retreat at his own resort in Doral, where members of Congress are spending taxpayer money on hotel rooms at Trump's property, while their Article 1 duties go unattended. He made explosion sounds with his mouth, labeled the Iranian people as quite nasty, and referred to Chuck Schumer as a registered Palestinian. He claimed that within a week, Iran would deploy nuclear weapons across the Middle East. And in the same speech, he declared, "We have to crush healthcare." This is not the behavior of a wartime leader projecting strength. It is a man feigning confidence while the foundations crumble around him. You do not win a geopolitical confrontation by contradicting your own Pentagon, disparaging your adversaries, and retreating to your golf resort to make explosion sounds. You lose credibility. And in war, credibility is the one currency that matters more than ammunition. So, what does this mean for you? Start with your gas prices. Oil surged toward $115 a barrel during this conflict. Even with the pullback following Trump's market-calming phone call, energy prices remain elevated and volatile. Every dollar increase in oil ripples through transportation costs, food prices, and manufacturing. Your grocery bill, your commute, and your heating costs are all tied to this war and to the credibility of the person claiming to manage it. Next, consider the 11 MQ-9 Reaper drones the United States has reportedly lost, according to CBS News and 2 U.S. officials familiar with the situation. These are among the most expensive unmanned systems in the American arsenal, and losing 11 in just a few days represents a material cost and a strategic setback. It also signals to every adversary monitoring the situation that this campaign is not the easy victory being portrayed on television. Finally, think about the diplomatic fallout. According to the Washington Post, Israel is already growing concerned and discussing potential exit strategies. Israeli officials are privately expressing doubts about whether it is in their best interest to continue fighting until the regime is toppled. They assert that the decision rests with Trump, who has wavered among various conceptions of the outcome. When your most crucial regional ally begins to hedge publicly, the foundation of the mission is already fracturing. France's president has stated he expects the war to last several more weeks. Once the coalition starts to fray, it does not simply reassemble. The cracks become the new architecture. Scenario 1, managed de-escalation. Trump declares victory regardless of the realities on the ground. He frames the destruction of Iran's navy and parts of its missile infrastructure as a mission accomplished and quietly steps back. Markets stabilize, oil prices drop, but Iran retains its nuclear enrichment capabilities. The regime consolidates power, now even more hardline than before the war began. Russia's strengthened position, the sanctions relief, and the diplomatic damage remain locked in. The banner reads victory, while the reality reflects a stalemate. Scenario 2, escalation spiral. Iran, emboldened by the contradictions in American messaging and visible fractures in the coalition, ramps up asymmetric operations. Proxy forces activate across Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. The Strait of Hormuz becomes a practical choke point, not just a theoretical one. Oil prices surge past $150. The global economy tips into recession. Trump, cornered, escalates further, potentially acting on the reported willingness to target Motoaham directly. Israel executes the operation. Suddenly, you are no longer in a limited strike campaign. You are engaged in a full-scale regional war with no exit ramp, no real coalition, and a president who previously described this as a short-term excursion. This is the scenario no one wants to name out loud, but it's one that everyone in the Pentagon is quietly preparing for. Scenario 3, the Putin realignment. This scenario should terrify strategic thinkers the most. Trump, unable to find an exit on his own, increasingly turns to Putin to broker a resolution. Russia, having already profited immensely from rising oil prices and reduced sanctions, positions itself as the indispensable mediator. Putin extracts further concessions regarding Ukraine, sanctions, and European security architecture in exchange for helping Trump save face in Iran. The war concludes not because America triumphed, but because Russia decided it was time to collect its dues. The new geopolitical reality is one where Moscow exerts greater influence over Middle Eastern outcomes than Washington. Not through military might, but through leverage. You don't need to fire a shot when the other side keeps handing you the keys. The relationship between stated objectives and actual outcomes in this conflict has already passed the point of credibility. The administration claimed regime change, yet the regime changed to a figure even worse. They promised to eliminate the nuclear threat, but the nuclear infrastructure remains intact. They aimed to project strength, yet the Pentagon contradicted the president within 72 hours. They proclaimed America first, yet Russia stands as the biggest winner thus far. Even if this war ends tomorrow, the lessons have already been absorbed by every government, military, and intelligence agency worldwide. The lesson is clear. American strategic communication cannot be trusted to remain consistent from Friday to Monday. American war aims shift based on stock market performance, and when pressure mounts, the first call goes not to allies, but to Moscow. Did Trump surrender to Iran, or did he simply reveal that there was never a coherent plan to begin with? Is this managed chaos or just chaos? When the next crisis arises, and it will, who will believe the timeline, the objectives, or the promise that this time will be different? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. Subscribe because the next chapter, the Strait of Hormuz standoff, the sanctions negotiations with Russia, the discussions about Israel's exit strategy, is coming quickly. This story is not slowing down. Do not look away. This content serves as commentary and analysis for informational purposes only. It does not constitute financial, legal, or geopolitical advice. Please consult qualified experts before making decisions based on this material.